How's it going, and welcome to No Fun Alloved's guide series on Waterdeep Dragon Heist, a 5th edition module. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Chapter 4, One Hell of a Summer. And my oh my, are things really heating up in Waterdeep. Of course, there is going to be a ton of spoilers, so players do not watch this, but DMs that want added insight on running this chaotic mess, go ahead and stick around because we have a lot to cover. And here it is, the encounter chain for the summer. We start off with the Mausoleum, then go to the converted Windmill, do Rooftop Chase, go to the alleyway, get into a street chase, go to the cellar complex, and find ourselves in the Courthouse, and then eventually go to the old tower. So the whole chain of events starts with your players going to the Mausoleum. But how do they know to get there? Well, once your players finally find that Nimblewright that fled the Gralhund estate, your players will find a map. And that map is going to have a nice little X in it that shows off the City of the Dead with the word Castellanter in it. That should prompt your players to go into the City of the Dead. However, there is, of course, the possibility that your players start asking around about the Castellanters, in which case, I would go ahead and tell them the public information, that the Castellanters are an incredibly rich and powerful people in the city of Waterdeep. I, of course, wouldn't reveal anything about their devil worshipping stuff, because that'd give away a ton of the stuff, but at least make it public, because everybody would actually know about these people. They are one of the most affluent people in town. They regularly host parties. They are in on everything, so make sure that it's pretty common that these people are known. Now, as to why they're being led to the Mausoleum, if your players start asking the more seedy characters in this campaign, oh, why would there be something hidden at their mausoleum? Then you could just have them say, oh yeah, you know, those rich people, they don't guard their old forgotten stuff. They don't care about that. People use the City of the Dead as a hideout for a bunch of things all the time. And that should prompt your players to going ahead and searching the area. Once your players make their way to the City of the Dead, they can find the place. If they're curious, they can in fact make a DC 20 investigation check and reveal that the place has been opened semi-recently. So it says here that your players need a DC 15 Dex check with Thieves Tools or a knock spell to open up this thing. Once again, never lock anything behind a wall that's unbeatable for your players. But what I would strongly recommend, of course, is if your players fail that check and no one's got a knock, then they have to pay someone to open this thing up for them. And of course, that ties into the whole money aspect of this campaign. You have to spend money to make money. Looking inside of the area, your players are going to find a bloodbath, as there was 2 NPCs that were killed, one of which is still barely left alive. If your players heal the alive individual, they'll find out that she was a cultist, and she was betrayed by several other cultists. Now, she's not going to reveal who the actual cult leaders are. She will just say, hey, oh, those people that attacked us, those are totally the people in charge and they betrayed us. So your players should hopefully be prompted into that. She can reveal, of course, that she is working for Asmodeus and all that, but she is not going to reveal that the Castellanters are involved in any regard. If she is asked why it is located in the Castellanter area, then simply just have her say, oh yeah, we just found this place and it doesn't look like it gets any use, so we just used it for ourselves. Now it's here where your players may choose to do different things. Here your players may decide to keep the cultist under their wing and have them show them around. But your players may just say, no, screw these people, they're cultists, we're going to turn them in. Or you might have some bleeding heart people that are opposed to Asmodeus and want to smite her or whatever. Whatever the case may be, your players will be told to go to the converted Windmill. Going down to the southern ward, your players will find a decrepit building. There inside, they can roam around the place, and on the top floor, they will find where the cult fanatics are. So it's here where you should have that awesome scene where your players open up the door, whether they bust it down or they pick the lock, whatever the case may be. They should have it where the cultist is presenting the Stone of Galore to a spined devil that's located right outside the window, and then all of a sudden heads turn, some of the spined devils look and just start flying away. The 2 cult fanatics are going to strike. However, something to note here is that the cult fanatics are going to specifically try and kill the cultist if she was brought along during this engagement. So hopefully the 2 cult fanatics can hold off the party for at least a round or 2, and then that is when the rooftop chase is going to occur. Your players are going to be chasing after spined devils, and it is going to be a fun time. Now, during the rooftop chase, that is where the fun things are going to occur here, because the flying creatures, the spined devils, they're not flying high up in the sky because they don't want to attract the attention of the Griffin Cavalry, but they are staying low, and that is still beneficial to them because your players are going to be dealing with the rooftop chase complications here, whereas they don't. They can simply just fly over and around whatever disturbances occur. but your players are going to have to be dealing with all this. So a lot of crazy stuff can occur, but your players can catch up to the devils. If your players actually do end up sniping any of the devils, then another spine devil is just going to appear and take the Stone of Galore. Once you feel like they are close enough, or you're just tired of this chase, that is what is going to lead us to the next encounter, the alley. Parked in an alley, your players are going to come across a cart drawn by several horses. Inside of this cart is located a one Willifort Crowell, who appears to be a tiefling, but is actually a doppelganger working for the Castellanters. In addition to that, there is a guard here, but while they appear to be a guard, they are actually a bearded devil in disguise. So a lot of crazy stuff going on here. In addition to that, there is also several imps located around here, just devils galore. The spine devils that brought the Stone of Galore here are going to drop it off with Willifort, and they're going to fight with the party. And once the fighting gets intense enough, and once the players basically get around the cart, that is when the cart is going to start storming off, and that is going to lead us to the street chase. Now, your players could either try and snipe the horses, they could try and snipe Willifort, they could try to snipe the driver, they could try to snipe the cart. Your players can do a lot of things here. Reward that creativity. If they choose to do something and they stick to it, it's probably going to work out. If they decide to, put the horses to sleep, then of course the cart's going to stop. If they try and bust the wheel, then the wheel's going to break. If they snipe the driver, then at least there's something fun to be had there where someone else takes over the reins. But before I continue on with the rest of these encounters, well, it can be said for a lot of the other seasons, they are spread out over the course of time. This is strongly implying that a lot of it is happening in a single day. And depending on the level of your party, depending on how much resources they end up spending at each location, this could be too much. So yes, the devils are cool here and all, but if your players are on the weaker side, if they are unlucky, then you may want to pull back on some of the punches here. Now with the card on the race, that is when you can have the urban chase complications arise. Once again, the enemies are immune to this because, hey, they're in a big cart with big horses. Everyone's going to get out of the way. But your players are not. Your players are going to have to try and get past all these complications should the complications arise. After the third round of this chase, however, that is when a huge crowd is going to block the path, and that is when things are going to really spice up here. Willifort's going to rush into this crowd, and that's a big deal because if you have anybody that has ranged attacks and they want to snipe Willifort, that could be severely bad. Any creature in the crowd is going to have half cover here, which means a +2 to your AC. And if any attack misses, then what that means is it actually hits a commoner. And that's bad because, of course, your players are presumably higher level, and at this point, if you hit a commoner, they're probably dead. So for this, I would strongly express that to your players. Say, hey, if you fire into a crowd, there is a very good chance you can kill somebody. And that should steer them away from doing it. But if they still press on, then continue on as normal. But of course, that is going to have dire consequences later down the line. So no matter if your players are able to knock out Willifort, the stone will be stolen by the lovable orphan. So if Willifort is still up, then he's just going to simply get pickpocketed. However, if he gets knocked down, a raven is going to fly down, take the Stone of Galore, and try and fly away with it. But the orphans are going to shoot the raven with a toy arrow, so no harm done to the poor raven. And then the orphans are going to take the stone. Where they take the stone is down into the cellar complex, where it is most foul. So once again, it says a DC 17 perception check to spot this. Do not lock this behind any sort of check, because if Willifort gets lost in the crowd and your players don't see him, then that sucks. Your players will essentially just lose out because they'll have no idea where the heck to find this guy. Make sure that your players get special attention drawn to that cellar complex. That is going to fuel the adventure for later down the line. Once your players make their way down into the cellar complex in the sewers, then go ahead and describe the incredibly terrible smell. Most people will actually be poisoned by this while they're down there, effectively meaning you have disadvantage on a bunch of things, unless they cover their nose. That can be a fun mechanic of everyone has to cover their nose with one hand, or if you have someone that is naturally accustomed to nastiness, then they are immune to its effects. It's not going to take too long. Your players are going to find a door, and they're going to see the orphans there. And the orphans are going to say, oh yeah, we just found that stone, but the stone is alive, and we dropped it over there. Your players can look over, and what's really fun is if your players have the orphans join them, then the orphans can say, hey, I don't remember that chair being there. So this is really cool, right? If your players have the orphans join them because your players want the orphans to be their guides in this little cellar complex, or they like their company or whatever, then your players get rewarded with being told, oh yeah, we don't remember that chair being there. But if your players say, hey, you know, leave the dangerous stuff to us, then your players are just going to see the stone of galore underneath the chair and probably think nothing of it. And then the mimic is going to strike. So after all said and done, your players do all this crazy stuff, and then they fight this mimic, presumably. Then they can finally get that stone of galore, but they aren't attuned to it yet because, unfortunately, as soon as they step out, they are going to get ambushed. Once your players step out of the cellar complex, they are going to be held at sword point by dozens of guards. This is a big deal because your players are lower level and presumably they don't have any real way to deal with this many guards. But here's the thing. This book presumes that your players are just going to naturally surrender. We of course have seen many a time where people fight back or they run away or do whatever. You're going to have to account for that, right? So here we get a nice detailed thing of if your players just surrender, which hopefully if they are lawful, they are going to surrender. But if they are less than lawful, then some things are going to occur. If your players just kill all of the guards, then that has its own tremendous set of detriments, and you should account for that. But if your players try and run away, then they have to, one, try and avoid being caught again, and now they are presumably being watched now, which means they can't go to their place of business or anything of that nature. If your players actually choose to surrender, then their things are confiscated, except the Stone of Galore isn't stolen from them, it's just in their possessions. And then they are going to be led down to the Dockward Courthouse. Now here's the fun part. If your players were able to kill Willowford Crowell, then they just sit around for a little bit, and then they have their time in court, and then easy peasy, nothing happens. But if they did not kill Willowford Crowell, that is when something unique is going to happen. The doppelganger is going to assume the form of the guard captain, which, by the way, they had met this guard captain before, and you should totally have that present in your campaign, that the guard captain actually remembers the players. Then the guard captain, who is now the doppelganger, is going to try and incentivize the characters into getting away, but trusting the guard captain with the Stone of Galore. However, if your players aren't willing to hop on board here of the guard captain saying, oh yeah, you know, everyone around here, they're out for you. I'll cause a distraction, you guys get away, I'll deliver the stone to you guys later. If your players aren't on board for that, then the guard captain is just going to turn around and say, hey, these guys killed some people, kill them. And then all of the guards are going to storm in, and the doppelganger is going to try to make the best of the situation. This encounter can go down so many different ways. Of course, it can end up in your players being arrested forever and all the time. It can end up with your players being big damned heroes. There is a lot of in-betweens as well. So hopefully your players catch on to the fact that this doppelganger is up to no good if they didn't kill him previously. Hopefully they can kill him now, because if they kill the doppelganger, then it appears in its true form. And at that point, the guards will say, oh, whoa, whoa, back off. Okay, we understand now. And then your players will have their time in court. Once your players finally get the chance of meeting with the magister, they can plead their case on everything that's going on here and all the illegal things that they've been getting up to. Here's the thing, though. During that chase, your players could have done some pretty terrible things. They could have accidentally killed a bunch of people. They could have destroyed a whole bunch of property. They could have done a number of things. And I say that if they do those terrible things, there should be repercussions, because they shouldn't be able to get away with anything. This is a city after all. If they do these terrible things, then punish them accordingly. They can try and lower the sentences for some offenses, and as well, they could also try to call in some favors from their guilds, such as Forest Grey, the Emerald Enclave, the Harpers, Loyal Alliance, Order of the Gauntlet. But regardless, there may be some punishments to be had here. The punishments are a fun little list of bulletin points here, but go ahead and expand upon that further. Make sure that they get their just dues. After dealing with all these punishments and this whole courthouse fiasco, your players can finally attune themselves to the Stone of Galore, and that is going to direct them to the Old Tower. At the Old Tower, your players will find that this place has been recently bought by a one Esveli Rosnar. You might know her as the Black Viper. She comes up several times in the campaign and is a wealth of fun information and adventure to be had. Your players arrive here and they are going to have to do something here, because this place is now owned by a rich person in the city. They can't just come in here and storm the place because there is guards. It's out in the open. Your players can't just do whatever they want willy-nilly. They're gonna have to talk to Esveli. Esveli actually discovered the opening to the Vault of Dragons, but she hasn't brought it up to the authorities because she knows that the authorities are just gonna take the tower over. So she knows that there's something in there. And once the players start snooping around the place, she's gonna eventually figure out that the players are there for that reason. So here's the thing. She's gonna try and weasel her way into the party saying, hey, I have the entrance to the Vault of Dragons here in my establishment. You have the key. Let's work together. I'm gonna join your party and I'm gonna walk away with an even split of the gold. She is going to lord that over the party and say, hey, if you don't work with me, then I can just obviously report you. I can do this, I can do that. But she doesn't want to report anybody, right? She doesn't want the city to find out that the Vault of Dragons is right there in her establishment. So she is going to try and be as nice and cordial as possible. And if your party is willing, then she's going to hop on board easy peasy. But if your party is not willing to engage with that, then she's going to have to come up with something creative because she wants that money. And right here, that social dynamic of working with this person or working against them is a ton of fun because, once again, that's just more and more of that gold that the players are losing out on. Yeah, it starts off with 500,000 gold, but if they have to promise more and more gold to more and more people, then that money becomes less and less. And just like that, that is one hell of a summer. Keep in mind, make sure to press on the fact that there is a sweltering heat going on at all times. And if they don't regularly hydrate, then they are going to start exhausting themselves. Literally exhaustion. If they don't get enough to drink, then they are going to have to make those con saves or suffer one level exhaustion. So, I mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again. Make sure that the time aspect of this adventure plays in, right? With the entirety of this book, it's never expressed really how long in between each thing is, whether that be hours, days, weeks, months, whatever the case may be. Make sure that time is consistent. With this chapter in particular, it seems that some of the events are taking place one after another, and that can be an absolute fun breakneck speed, but if you want to extend the time out, be sure to do so and make it more believable. Make sure that your players are always able to get to the right place at the right time. Much like the other chapters dealing with finding the Stone of Galore, your players aren't immediately catching on to who the villains actually are. Your players will be bumping into devils, and they'll know that there's some cult going on to Asmodeus. They'll know that there's some devils. But really, the only bumping they have with the Castellanters is, in fact, the very beginning where they're dealing with the crypt. So they may not catch on, but if the Stone of Galore is stolen, then of course there'll be some fun times with that. I think a really fun thing that can happen is if the Stone of Galore is stolen by the villains, in this case the Castellanters, then maybe your players team up with Esveli, aka the Black Viper, and pull off an awesome heist in a devil cult. That could be an absolute fun time. So go ahead and tell me. Do you find that Hell of a Summer is one of the more unique ones as they're dealing with cults and devils and getting into chases galore and of course dealing with the espionage of doppelgangers? Do you think that the heat's going to play a factor, or because they're in the middle of the city they're going to be drinking all the time and thus they don't have to worry about it? And will your players be able to get to the Stone of Galore before the Castellanters? Go ahead and tell me all those things because I want to know. But that's going to do it for me. Thank you for watching, thanks for listening, and thanks to my amazing patrons. You guys are incredible, and I cannot wait to see you all in the next one.